quote, "This is why we can't have nice things," end quote. It's a message I got from an exasperated senior Republican congressional aide after President Trump abruptly announced he will not sign a bipartisan housing affordability bill that Congress passed overwhelmingly yesterday. Here's what the president said, quote, "Today's housing news conference and signing is hereby canceled until such time as we pass the desperately needed Save America Act, which I consider to be a national emergency." Now, the president really pulled the rug out from under Republicans at the very moment GOP leaders were celebrating what they thought was about to be a big GOP victory, a presidential signing ceremony.
Let's show the American people what legislating looks like. Let's show the American people how you bring together and do something on a bicameral basis. And we did that. And we did that in conjunction with President Trump and his priorities.
What's happening, friends? Dr. John podcast is here. So this is happening right now. Trump is holding popular legislation hostage to force passage of his Save America Act, refusing to sign any bills unless he gets his election overhaul. The unprecedented power play is fracturing the GOP as the president shows he's willing to sabotage his own party's agenda and its midterm strategy to get what he wants. Picture the situation. House Republicans and Senate Republicans worked together on a major bipartisan housing affordability bill. This was a big deal. This was something both parties could agree on. This was something voters actually care about because the cost of living is destroying families and housing prices have gone completely insane. Here was a bill that was supposed to help with that crisis. It passed Congress with veto-proof majorities, meaning it would pass even if Trump vetoed it. It was popular across the board. Republicans had been selling this bill back home to their constituents. They'd been telling voters they were working on the cost of living crisis. They'd been using this bill as an example of bipartisan accomplishment.
Again, that was at the almost exact same moment President Trump posted that he's not signing that very bill that the chairman said shows what legislating looks like. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson at that same press conference a few minutes later.
In the process of this press conference, President Trump announced that he is canceling the bill signing for the housing bill that you all were just talking about. What is your reaction?
Yeah, my reaction is the truth of the matter. I spoke to the president for 20 minutes before I went in and gave that rousing speech to the House Republicans this morning. He and I've talked about this a lot. He has expressed the priority and the preference of the Save America Act.
Now, Johnson claims President Trump told him in that call this morning that he was going to cancel the signing. Let's get straight to Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Wow, Manu.
Yeah, completely blindsiding Republican leaders, particularly here in the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune had no idea that the president would essentially cancel what was expected to be a victory lap. The Republicans have been pleading with the president.
They'd been setting up a big signing ceremony at the White House. Trump was supposed to sign it. It was going to be this big celebration. Good news for everyone. Republicans, Democrats, Trump, everyone gets a win. This bill addressed something voters genuinely care about. This bill showed that Congress could actually get things done. This was the kind of moment politicians use to demonstrate they're effective and that government can work. And then Trump just blew it up. He canceled the signing ceremony. He posted on Truth Social that he wouldn't sign the housing bill unless Congress first passed his Save America Act. And just think about how absurd that is. This is so clearly hostage-taking. This is Trump saying, you can have your popular bill, but only if you give me my election overhaul first. The GOP leadership was completely caught off guard. Senate Majority Leader John Thune was caught off guard. CNN reported that Republicans were shocked. The GOP thought they had a deal. The GOP thought they were going to get this win. And instead, Trump just told them, no, you don't get anything unless you do what I want first.
To focus on an affordability agenda. And they just passed this bill with massive bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate. They wanted to go and tout their efforts to reduce housing costs. And just moments ago, that announcement by the president catching the Republican leaders off guard. I just talked to John Thune himself moments ago. I asked him, did the president make a mistake by canceling the signing ceremony and making these demands on the Save America Act? He said, I mean, that was his call to make. And he went on to tout that housing bill, said it's been worked on for a long time. He called it a great piece of legislation. He said it's a, quote, an affordability issue. And he said, quote, I eventually hope he'll find his way to sign it. So expect that to be a big part of this discussion that is still expected to happen behind closed doors. Trump has been making this case for months for the Senate to pass the so-called Save America Act, but they have tried repeatedly in the Senate to do that, and they simply just do not have the votes to pass it. John Thune has made that case to the president directly. He has said that publicly. Other Republican senators have said that. Trump has come back and said, well, just do away with the filibuster and try to pass it along straight party lines.
That's not how you get people to cooperate with you. That's not how you build loyalty. That's not how you move legislation. That's how you make people angry and resentful and start thinking about how they can survive if this guy goes off the rails completely. Because here's the thing, Republicans have veto-proof majorities on the housing bill. They can pass it without Trump. They can override his veto if he actually vetoes it. So legally, Republicans have the power here. Legally, Republicans can just pass the bill and ignore Trump's demands. But they don't do that because they're scared. They're scared of what Trump will do to them if they cross him. They're scared of primary challenges. They're scared of Trump turning the base against them. They're scared of being destroyed in their districts. So even though Republicans have the power to pass this bill without Trump, they choose to capitulate to his demands. They choose to negotiate. They choose to try to make a deal with him.
But Thune does not have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. That is a second problem that the Senate Republican leader has. Meantime, the Speaker of the House says that they may try to roll this into the budget process to pass the Save America Act along straight party lines. But here's another problem. Doing that would run afoul, very likely, in the Senate's very strict budget rules. So there is really no way to get this bill to the president's desk. And meantime, the legislative agenda has been completely stymied. A key surveillance law, the spying powers have been turned off. The position for the Director of National Intelligence is not filled on a permanent basis because of the president's demands. So the question here, Dana, is amid this turmoil between the Senate GOP and President Trump, will anything change when he meets behind closed doors? Will he berate those GOP senators? Will they convince him that his push is not actually going to succeed? All big questions in a matter of moments. We'll see what happens behind closed doors, Dana.
Yeah, and you can see all the activity behind money. That is because the president is still expected to be up there despite saying he's not going to sign.
And that willingness to capitulate, that willingness to let Trump hold popular legislation hostage, that's what's starting to break some Republicans. That's what's starting to make some Republicans think, okay, this guy is willing to blow up our agenda just to get what he wants. This guy is willing to sabotage our midterm strategy. This guy is willing to hold popular bills hostage. How far is he willing to go? And if he's willing to do this, what will we need to do to get out from under him? What are our options if this guy actually crosses a real red line? That's the dangerous thinking that starts happening when Trump pushes too hard. There are multiple layers to this situation, and they're all adding up to create this pressure cooker inside the GOP. First, you've got Trump holding the housing bill hostage for the Save America Act. The housing bill is this really popular bipartisan piece of legislation that addresses something voters actually care about.
This bill. Manu, thank you so much. Let us know if you hear anything else here with a terrific group of reporters. Let me just bottom line this because there's so much drama in what happened. But taking a step back, what the president is doing is saying, I care so much about this legislation that he wants to be put in place about voting to make it harder to vote and having to do with a whole bunch of other restrictions, I should say. He thinks it's about cleaning it up, but there are lots of debates on that. He cares so much about that the number one issue for voters, which is affordability, and housing is a huge part of that, he's willing to sacrifice that despite a big bipartisan vote.
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask you to do this. Look at the bipartisan numbers in the House and the Senate that this legislation passed with, overwhelmingly, right? How often does that happen? When do we see both parties coming together to address a major concern of voters?
And instead of letting Republicans get this win, Trump is saying, no, you don't get this unless you give me my election overhaul first. And the election overhaul, the Save America Act, has minimal chances of passing in the Senate because it's super controversial and there's a filibuster in place. The filibuster requires 60 votes to pass a bill. Democrats have less than 60 votes, so the Save America Act is basically dead on arrival in the Senate. Trump knows that. Senate Republicans know that. But Trump is still demanding it. Trump is still holding the housing bill hostage for it. And he's basically forcing Senate Republicans to waste time and political capital on a bill that's never going to pass. That's insane. That's sabotage. You've got Republicans running for midterm elections. You've got Republican candidates going home and telling voters that they're tackling the cost of living crisis. You've got Republican candidates saying, look what we passed for you on housing. And then Trump cancels the signing and says, I'm not signing anything unless you pass my election overhaul. And now those Republican candidates are in a position where they can't get their win. They can't get Trump to sign the housing bill. They can't show voters that they accomplished something on cost of living. They have to explain to voters that the president wouldn't sign it because he wanted something else first. That's a disaster for Republican midterm strategy. That's exactly what you don't want to happen. And the fact that Trump would do this, the fact that Trump would willingly sabotage his own party's midterm messaging just to try to force passage of his election overhaul, that tells you how badly Trump wants this bill. That tells you how obsessed Trump is with this. But that's not even the craziest part. At the same time Trump is doing this with the housing bill, House Republicans are trying to pass a resolution about war powers. Specifically, a resolution directing Trump to withdraw U.S. forces from Iran or get congressional approval to continue the war. And this is important because Congress has the constitutional power to declare war and to control the military. Trump has been expanding U.S. military operations without congressional approval, and House Republicans are actually trying to push back. House Republicans are actually trying to exercise their constitutional power, and they put together this resolution, and they're going to vote on it. And then at the last second, they cancel the vote. They cancel the vote because they realize they don't have the support to defeat the resolution. They don't have the votes to make sure it fails. They don't have enough Republicans to block it. And that scares them because that means if they actually let the vote happen, the resolution might pass. And if it passes, that would constrain Trump's war powers. That would require Trump to either withdraw from Iran or get congressional approval. And they don't want that to happen. They don't want to constrain Trump's war powers. They don't want to require him to go to Congress. So they just cancel the vote. Think about what that means. House Republicans are so scared of crossing Trump on war powers that they won't even allow a vote on the issue. They won't allow the constitutional process to happen. They just cancel the whole thing. And that's also insane. That's also a sign that something is broken in the system. Congress is supposed to have power over war. Congress is supposed to have the ability to declare war and control military operations. But House Republicans are so afraid of Trump that they won't even let their colleagues vote on the issue. They just kill it. They cancel the whole thing. And the explanation they give is that they don't have the votes to defeat it, meaning they know that a majority of the House will vote to constrain Trump's war powers if they were allowed to vote, meaning they know that if they let this vote happen, Trump would lose, and they're not willing to let that happen, so they just cancel the vote entirely. Now add on top of this the fact that Trump has been on a revenge campaign against Republicans who cross him. Bill Cassidy, a senator from Louisiana, voted to convict Trump in his first impeachment, and Trump has been coming after him. And Cassidy just got forced into retirement. A Trump-backed challenger ran against him in the primary, and Cassidy couldn't survive the pressure. Indiana state legislators who resisted Trump's gerrymandering push lost their seats. Trump is targeting Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky for criticizing him on the Epstein files and the Iran conflict. This is Trump's pattern. Trump destroys the careers of Republicans who cross him. Trump uses the base and primary challenges and threats to force out anyone who stands up to him. And every Republican in Congress knows this. Every Republican sees what Trump does to people who oppose him. And that's why they're willing to cancel votes on war powers and hold hostage housing bills and do whatever Trump wants because they're scared of him. They're scared of what he'll do to their careers if they cross him. And then on top of everything, you've got Trump panicking about Democrats moving to eliminate the filibuster. Democrats are talking about a plan to expand the Supreme Court, impose term limits, add ethics rules, and abolish the filibuster. And Trump freaks out. Trump goes on Truth Social and says if they do this, the Republican Party is dead. He's terrified of Democrats eliminating the filibuster because if they do, they could do anything. They could pass whatever they want. They could overturn elections. They could do all the things Trump is trying to do. And so Trump is now pushing Republicans to eliminate the filibuster first. Trump is saying we have to destroy the filibuster before Democrats do. We have to get rid of the filibuster so we have complete power. And he's arguing that desperate times call for desperate measures. But Senate Republican leaders like John Thune and Mike Johnson, they're warning that if Republicans nuke the filibuster, it could ultimately come back to bite them. It could ultimately empower Democrats, because once you destroy the filibuster, the other side gets to use that power too. The other side gets to pass whatever they want, and you can't put that power back. You can't unring that bell. So you've got this insane situation where Trump is simultaneously pushing Senate Republicans to destroy the filibuster and pushing House Republicans to hold hostage popular legislation, and doing all of this while his revenge campaigns are destroying the careers of Republicans who cross him. And the GOP leadership is trying to navigate all of this. Senate Majority Leader Thune is trying to make up with Trump after these tensions explode. House Speaker Mike Johnson is trying to manage a caucus that's increasingly frustrated with Trump's demands, and they're all trying to figure out how to keep the party together while Trump is yanking the chain in all directions at once. And at some point, that breaks. At some point, GOP members start thinking about the nuclear options. At some point, they start thinking about whether they can move against Trump if they really had to. At some point, they start gaming out scenarios where they don't have to follow Trump's lead. Let's break down what's really happening here, because this is the story that matters. Trump is holding popular legislation hostage to force passage of his controversial election overhaul, and that's creating a breaking point in the GOP. Because here's the thing, Trump is willing to sabotage his own party's agenda just to get what he wants. Trump is willing to blow up Republicans' midterm strategy. Trump is willing to tell them, no, you don't get your housing bill unless you pass my election law first. And that's a fundamentally different approach to leadership than what most presidents do. Most presidents try to get their allies what they want. Most presidents try to help their party succeed. Most presidents trade on their political capital by helping popular bills pass. But Trump operates differently. Trump uses popular bills as leverage. Trump holds them hostage. Trump makes it clear that he gets his way or nobody gets anything. And that's a short-term strategy that works if you have complete control. It's a strategy that works if nobody dares to cross you. But it's a strategy that breaks down when people start thinking about the limits of your power. When people start wondering what they can do if you push too far. When people start gaming out ways to survive if you actually go over the edge. And the housing bill situation is classic Trump because he doesn't need to hold it hostage. The bill can pass without him. Republicans have veto-proof majorities. They can pass it and override his veto if he actually vetoes it. But Trump doesn't care about that because he has leverage in a different way. He has leverage because Republicans are scared. Republicans are scared of the base. Republicans are scared of primary challenges. Republicans are scared of Trump destroying their careers. So even though they have the constitutional power to pass the bill without Trump, they choose not to exercise that power. They choose to capitulate to Trump's demands. They choose to let him hold the bill hostage. But that capitulation has a limit. That willingness to fold has a breaking point. And the housing bill situation is starting to approach that breaking point for some Republicans. Some Republicans are starting to think, okay, how much is this guy willing to sacrifice just to get his way? How much damage is he willing to do to the party? How much are we willing to sacrifice for him? House Republicans canceling the war powers vote shows that they're so afraid of Trump that they won't even allow constitutional processes to happen. This is huge because this is about Congress's fundamental power. Congress has the constitutional authority to declare war. Congress has the constitutional authority to control the military. But House Republicans are so scared of Trump that they won't even let their colleagues vote on war powers. They just cancel the whole thing. They kill the vote. They prevent the constitutional process from happening. And the reason is they know how that vote would come out. They know that if they let House members vote on whether to constrain Trump's war powers, the resolution would probably pass. They know that a majority of the House will vote to require Trump to either withdraw from Iran or get congressional approval. And they don't want that to happen. So they just cancel the vote. And that's a sign of how broken the system has become when the majority party is so afraid of the president that it won't even allow constitutional processes to function. And that's the thing that's starting to scare some Republicans because they're realizing that this is not sustainable. They're realizing that you can't just cancel constitutional votes because you're afraid of the president. They're realizing that at some point you have to actually stand up and exercise your power. At some point you have to actually let Congress do what Congress is supposed to do. And if Trump's willing to retaliate against Republicans who do that, well, then Republicans have to start thinking about what tools they have available. Republicans have to start thinking about whether they could move together against Trump if they really needed to. Republicans have to start thinking about war powers constraints and filibuster fights and things that are more serious than primary challenges. Trump's revenge campaign against Republicans who cross him is both keeping the party in line and creating a quiet underground of Republicans who are gaming worst-case scenarios. Because Trump has established a clear pattern. If you vote to convict me, I will destroy your career. If you oppose me, I will come after you. If you cross me, you will pay the price. And that's a powerful tool for controlling behavior. That's why most Republicans fall in line. That's why most Republicans vote the way Trump wants them to. That's why most Republicans are willing to sabotage their own legislation and cancel their own votes. They're afraid. They know what happens to people who cross Trump. They know that Bill Cassidy voted to convict and got forced out. They know that Indiana legislators who opposed Trump's gerrymandering lost their seats. They know that Trump is coming after Massey. They see the pattern, and they don't want to be next. But here's the thing. The more Trump uses these tactics, the more he scares people, the more people start thinking about what they would do if Trump actually crossed a real red line. The more people start thinking about whether the fear is worth it. If Trump actually does something that can't be survived in the current system, some Republicans are quietly thinking, okay, if Trump ever actually commits a crime, if he ever does something that makes me look like a criminal for defending him, what do I do? Some Republicans are thinking, if Trump ever orders military action that's clearly unconstitutional, what do I do? Some Republicans are thinking, if Trump ever tries to use the military to overturn an election, what do I do? And those are the scenarios where revenge and fear might not be enough to keep people in line. Those are the scenarios where Republicans might be willing to move. Those are the scenarios where you might see a real revolt. The filibuster fight is exposing the core dilemma of the GOP and potentially opening the door to serious resistance. Trump is pushing Republicans to eliminate the filibuster. Trump is saying we have to destroy it. And Senate Republican leaders are saying, wait, if we destroy the filibuster, Democrats can use it too. But Trump doesn't care. Trump only thinks about his immediate needs. Trump only thinks about what he needs right now. Trump doesn't think about what happens later when Democrats are in power and they use the same tools against Republicans. And that difference in thinking, that difference in time horizons, that's becoming a source of tension in the party. Because Senate Republicans understand that destroying the filibuster could come back to haunt them. Senate Republicans understand that this is a long-term calculation. Senate Republicans understand that you can't control the filibuster once it's gone. It's gone for everyone. And Democrats will use it, and Democrats will pass things that Republicans hate, and there's nothing Republicans can do about it. So you've got a situation where Trump is demanding something that Senate Republican leaders think is a bad idea. And that's different from the normal situation where Republicans are unified around Trump. That's different from the normal situation where Republicans all want the same thing. And when you've got Republican leaders thinking that Trump's pushing them towards something bad, when you've got Republican leaders thinking about the long-term consequences, when you've got Republican leaders worried about what happens after Trump, that's when the party starts to fracture. That's when you start to see cracks. That's when you start to see people thinking about alternatives. Here's the reality right now. Trump thinks he's completely in control of the GOP. Trump thinks he can hold legislation hostage and push whatever agenda he wants, and the GOP will fall in line. But Trump is actually creating a situation where some Republicans are starting to question whether they want to be in line. Trump is creating a situation where some Republicans are starting to think about what they would do if things got worse. Trump is creating a situation where House Republicans are canceling votes on constitutional issues because they're so afraid of him. And that's not sustainable. That's not the foundation of a healthy political party. And Trump is shocked when GOP leaders are frustrated with him. Trump doesn't understand why holding the housing bill hostage would make Republicans angry. Trump doesn't understand why demanding the elimination of the filibuster would scare senators. Trump doesn't understand that the more he pushes, the more he coerces, the more he threatens, the more he's building a quiet revolt, the more he's creating scenarios where Republicans start thinking about moving against him. And that's the shock he's going to get when one day some Republicans actually do move, and he realizes that his leverage is not as absolute as he thought it was. The GOP is not going to break overnight. The GOP is not going to suddenly turn against Trump in a dramatic moment. But what is happening is a slow, steady erosion of trust and willingness to follow. Republicans are starting to realize that Trump's demands are not just inconvenient, they're actively harmful to the party's electoral prospects. Republicans are starting to realize that Trump's willingness to hold popular legislation hostage means they can't count on him to help them win elections. Republicans are starting to realize that Trump's obsession with his election overhaul is not about good governance, it's about his personal agenda. And that realization is going to have consequences. The housing bill hostage situation is a turning point. The war powers vote cancellation is a turning point. The filibuster fight is a turning point. All of these things are happening at the same time, and they're all pointing in the same direction. The GOP is fracturing. Trump's control is weakening. And the more Trump pushes, the more he demands, the more he threatens, the faster that fracture will happen. Trump thinks he's winning. Trump thinks he's showing everyone who's boss. But what he's actually doing is showing everyone that he can't be trusted with power. He's showing everyone that he'll sacrifice anything, including his own party's success, to get what he wants. And that's not a strategy that builds loyalty. That's a strategy that builds resentment. And resentment eventually finds a way to express itself. So watch what happens next. Watch whether the housing bill actually gets signed. Watch whether Republicans find a way to pass the Save America Act. Watch whether the filibuster gets destroyed. Watch whether any Republicans actually start speaking out more openly about their concerns. Because what's happening right now is the beginning of something. It might not be the end of Trump's control over the GOP, but it's the beginning of the end. It's the moment when the cracks start to show. It's the moment when people start thinking about what comes after Trump. And that's the moment that Trump, in his arrogance and his obsessiveness, doesn't see coming. The shock is coming. The shock is going to hit him when he realizes that his control was never as absolute as he thought it was. And when that shock comes, everything changes.